Hello and welcome to this video for Fortune and Freedom. I'm joined today by my old friend and co-conspirator Boaz Shoshan, who has some things he wants to tell us about artificial intelligence and the supposedly unfounded fears of all of us losing our jobs to technology, which is of course as old as technology itself. Boaz, right now, whenever I open my news feeds, I see warnings about artificial intelligence, including from some of the leading thinkers who came up with AI in many examples. What's wrong with these fears?
It's a good question. It's great to see you again, Nikolai. Great to be back with Southbank Investment Research. Let's see where to start with this. So I had a couple of experiences recently which drove me to get in contact with you and tell you that we should make this video. The first of these was when I had the misfortune of being invited to attend a panel of journalists discussing how AI was going to affect journalism. Now, on this panel, I was not on there on the stage or anything like that. I was just in attendance. One of the journalists, the arbiters of truth that we rely on to tell us the facts about what is going on in the real world and sieving through all the fake news, actually said with a straight face that when you apply for a loan at a bank, and it tells you within 40 seconds or whatever whether or not you can get it or not, that was artificial intelligence. And it was using this as an example of how artificial intelligence is affecting everything in society. And if this is what journalists believe, it makes a lot of sense why there is so much hysteria regarding
It explains a lot, yeah.
Exactly. But it doesn't just go there. So that was one experience from one side of the spectrum. That someone believed that Microsoft Excel with a bit of JavaScript was artificial intelligence, and this was AI. I had another experience on the other side of the spectrum where I was speaking to a fund manager who I have an extraordinary amount of respect for. Very, very learned guy, very well read, and I've a lot of time for his views about the world. But he forwarded on an article from somebody who unironically was describing the arrival of large language models as the birth of the Antichrist in the history of the world. I went into great detail on this. Was like a new being is being born, right? This is arriving. Now, while I would love that to be true, because then we could all fight against the Antichrist, we could all be heroes and we could all be redeemed. My experience on Earth has informed me that the reality of these things is actually much more boring, and I fear that is the case with artificial intelligence, or at least large language models, as they are, as we're seeing proliferate and everybody go crazy about today. I don't know how much you've used ChatGPT and the likes of these models, but from my perspective, these things, the reaction to this is incredibly overblown, and it's in a number of different ways. So with likes of ChatGPT, etc., you have industrialists and venture capitalists saying that this is actually going to lay off most of the workforce. White collar jobs are going to get absolutely nuked, and everybody's just going to be using these things on a day-to-day basis and relying on them for all of their needs. On the other side of the spectrum, you have people who wouldn't be profiting from this, saying, on the labor side, saying this is terrible, this technology needs to be controlled, this technology needs to be constrained because it's going to make everybody redundant. And then on the far right, you have people who believe that this is the arrival of the Antichrist, and this must be destroyed because this is evil technology. Now, I've not seen anybody make this comparison before. To my eyes, it is abundantly clear. Perhaps you can correct me if you have seen other people make this, but I think there is a very clear comparison to be drawn with automata in the 18th century. So back in the 1700s, there were several inventors who created these things, but the most famous would be a guy in France called Jacques de Vaucanson. Now, this guy made a number of automata throughout his years. The most famous of these was a duck, which had the appearance of eating, and water would waddle around and would have the appearance of defecating as well. And this was a great wonder. Loads of people loved this. won him a lot of respect in the French court. He also made a variety of android automata, so waiters that would clear tables and serve things, and a flute player as well that could actually play the flute. Now, these were greeted by, to begin with, they were greeted. There was a very broad range of reactions to this. But he won a lot of favor at the French court, so there was a lot of interest in this from the elite side, who saw this as great. And then these automata had the full spectrum of responses. So there was a great feeling at the time that this was the birth of a new type of life, almost. We have these. Man has sort of stolen the fire of the gods like Prometheus and created these machines that are living somehow. They have not skin of flesh, but they have of steel, and instead of brains, they have these gears and whatever. But there was very little understanding as to what was really going on. At the end of the day, it was a wind-up duck. But people didn't realize that. They didn't know what was going on behind it. They just saw this inventor with this incredible invention. And as a result, there was all of this wonderment, and you saw the same skew of reactions. So you had people thinking, "Wow, man has now created these robots that are going to replace everything. Why would I want a normal duck when I could just get a robot duck? Why would we need normal waiters when we could have robotic waiters? Why would we need normal flute players when we could have an android flute player? This is going to make loads of people redundant. It's going to make industrialists, this is pre-industrial revolution, but this is going to make people in those industries, the pre-industries, these artisans, very, very wealthy. And it's also going to mean that we're not going to have to work anymore. At the same time, men of the cloth in religion, on the religious side of the church, saw these as diabolical inventions, infernal devices that should be destroyed. This was the hand of Satan animating these things, and as a result, we needed to get rid of these. So you had this grand skew of reactions to automata. A little later on in the 18th century, you see the arrival of music boxes, which also create a similar reaction amongst artists. So all of these musicians and people who enjoyed live music, absolutely paranoid that nobody was gonna listen to live music anymore because we had these musical boxes. And why would you need a musician to play an instrument when you can just wind this thing up and listen to it? And this
presumably then the French Union of Waiters and the French Union of Flute Players and they succeeded in banning these automatons. What is it? Automata. Tomato. Presumably they succeeded in banning them. That's why we don't have robotic. Actually, I went to a restaurant a few days ago which had a robotic waiter, purely as a novelty item. I think it didn't do a very good job. There are also obviously human waiters. But anyways, presumably they succeeded, and that's why for the subsequent 200 years, we don't have robotic waiters and robotic flute players, right?
Well, there was the Industrial Revolution, there was the Industrial Revolution that took place after, but before that, of course, there was the French Revolution, where a lot of Jacques de Vaucanson's automata were destroyed, right? Whether or not that was by annoyed workers or not, we don't really know. But at the end of the day, this was a massive overreaction to these automata. So yes. At the end of the day, it was just a wind-up duck. But people projected all of these fears and hopes onto them, and they were very broadly misunderstood. What's important and what we should note is what Jacques de Vaucanson is remembered for is for the automata, and not actually for his most important inventions, which were the invention of the lathe and the invention of the automatic loom. And both of these would change the world very dramatically.
So, Boaz, you're telling me that this was sort of the precursor of the actual famous Luddite movement, which is the typically quoted example of these fears.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly an element of that, though I think it's a lot more nuanced because the range of responses are all incorrect as far as I'm concerned. So the people who say this is going to lay off all the white collar workers and this is going to be a good thing are incorrect. And the same people who think that this is the Antichrist are also wrong. And this goes beyond the whole Luddite movement. I think with LLMs, just as people were hypnotized by these automata, I think with the LLMs that we see today, people don't understand what's going on underneath the surface, and as a result, they think that there's wizardry going on, and there's so many examples of this, and a lot of this comes down, in my view, to the fact that you don't see what's going on underneath the surface. So when you give ChatGPT a prompt, it's a bit like asking a genie a question, because the answer just comes out of nowhere. You've no idea where the answer comes from. And then some of the engineers don't know where the answer comes from. And a lot of people think that this is proof that, these things are becoming sentient. Really, this is a product of how large the data set is that this model is drawing from. So, these engineers say, I don't know where these answers are coming from. And, the fact of the matter is, you could spend your entire life trying to read all of the information that it's drawing from, and you wouldn't be able to get through 5% of it. There's so much information that there is so much information that it's very hard to find out where this is originally being sourced from. When you're using ChatGPT, it becomes abundantly clear. If you ask it about anything that you know about yourself, that it doesn't understand the meaning of the words being provided to you. It really just understands the sequences in which they are commonly arranged. And so people who think that there is sentience behind these models are, in my view, either really optimistic, or they kind of want a disaster to happen. So in the case
there's a wonderful inherent bias in there, right? Because you tend to ask ChatGPT in similar applications questions about things that you don't know. It's not like you can go on there and ask you the question that you're an expert in, that you understand yourself, in order to come to that realization that you just have there. So there's a wonderful bias in creating that effect inherent in the application.
100%. When I first used ChatGPT, I was very optimistic in using it, because it was like I felt like I was using Google for the first time again. There was all this information at my fingertips, and I could find it. Because Google is just terrible these days. That's something that people don't talk about nearly as much as they should. For a company that has that much money, it is extraordinary how poor, how badly downhill this thing has gone. It used to be fantastic to use Google. You could find out anything you wanted. And now it felt a bit like that using ChatGPT, because I could find information again. But then you get all of these errors. So I remember I asked it for a list of, because I'm big into wristwatches, right? And I asked it for a list of watches that had a very specific, sort of styling addition to it, right? And it comes back with 10. 9 of these are incorrect. And I say, just to see what would happen, I say all of these are incorrect. And it responds with, "You're right. All of them are incorrect. I'm sorry." So one of them was right, but even it doesn't really know. So, and there's a similar thing with people who are really afraid of AI being here, the sentience being here, where, for example, we told this model not to speak in Farsi, and then it spoke in Farsi. It's working against us. And this is evidence, in my view, that these things are dumb, not smart, right? It is not understanding the prompt you are giving it. And as a result, it's giving you back these incorrect results. At the end of the day, I don't actually see much of it. I'm not a software engineer, so full disclosure there. I don't understand exactly the code that is drawing on this information and coming back with a response to a prompt. But I don't see a difference between ChatGPT and an extraordinarily large Excel spreadsheet, which you are then applying a formula to. The main difference is you don't see the data set that it's drawing from, because it's extraordinarily large and they wouldn't want to show you anyway. And you don't see the formulas either. So all you get are these prompts that then turn into formulas, which then go through the information and bring it back. This arrival, like a lot of people calling for, we need a government control over this industry because artificial general intelligence is arriving, is, in my view, a massive overreaction to what is actually going on here. Again, this is people looking at a clockwork duck and seeing life take place, when in reality it's just a clockwork duck. So I'm very, when we think of how these things will change, will change the world. Again, I refer back to Jacques de Vaucanson, who created the loom and the lathe, and it was these tools that did change the world. It wasn't the automata. I think with LLMs and ChatGPTs, this is a massive overreaction to them by pretty much everyone in the commentary space, especially artists who say that, you know, this is going to steal all our jobs, this is destroying our work. It's just the same as with musical boxes. Nobody uses musical boxes anymore.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, because I think music is the only one where the impact that was feared from technology has actually played down, in the sense that if you wanted to listen to music before a music box, or I would have said a record before that, you had to have someone come and play the music, and as a result, there's a huge amount of jobs for musicians, because there was no way of having music without somebody there doing it, and their ability to do it depended on the quality of music. So since then, we've gone to a system where I can, within 2 seconds, get pretty much every song. In fact, I don't even have to push a button. I can probably just say into my phone, I can get just about every song. I can get, I know this from experience, I can get just about every English nursery rhyme sung in Japanese. The possibilities are endless, and there's no musician singing the Disney song in Japanese in the room. So the amount of people that are employed as musicians really has been crushed massively as a result of that, and we now have far fewer musicians that are dominant throughout the industry, and we will access the best version of each song rather than having, luck of the draw for whether the quality of the musician is going to be good or not. So in that industry, it really has caused a huge change.
I disagree, because the fear at the time was that there would be no need for a musician whatsoever. Again, you were just listening to a recording. So when it comes to artists who create, say, visual art, paintings and things like that, plenty of fear there that people are going to be using DALL-E to create all of the pictures they want to look at, rather than something that was actually created by a person. And I have no appreciation or understanding for contemporary art. So like I can't comment on what the market will want in the future. But I think this response is just the same as musicians thinking that the creation of a musical box, which wasn't a recording, right? It's just a coil with teeth on it, would replace somebody.
But don't you think that the 80% of musicians who, if we didn't have all of those automated musical systems, we would need still that 5 or 10 or 100 times as many musicians, and they would have jobs. You don't think that's fair or accurate?
I would disagree. I don't think you can't imagine the modern world today without recording.
Yeah.
So what that would look like. So we'd have video, but we wouldn't be able to record audio.
It doesn't really work. But the point being that if you wanted to listen to music, you'd have to find a person to do it, which implies that there'd be a lot more people. But that is really the only real example where. And it's not like musicians have failed to move on and find other possibilities. In fact, you could argue that, download some software quickly and you can become a musician and create your own music and create your own songs. I remember my uncle retired and just sat there all day making techno music that nobody ever heard other than himself. That became his big passion. So it just played out in different ways. Let's address whether AI is a fundamentally different type of technological development to the ones we've seen in the run-up to today, when the similar fears, so, Coopers were worried, and Horseshoe and blacksmiths, and the Luddites with the looms. Presumably someone was worried about the wheel when that came out. All throughout history, we've had these situations when a new technology comes along and the people that are employed in the technology that are obsolete because of the new technology complain about it, and all these fears get brought up, and then not much happens, and we all move on.
Right,
presumably are harmed. Whalers and so on and so forth. Those industries and those people are harmed, but we understand that the benefit outweighs the cost, and we move on, and we become more prosperous as a result. And yes, every time there's a new technology, we still go through this process again. The question is whether AI is fundamentally different from that chain that I've just described. Because if it is, then maybe those fears are founded. Your argument is that it's not. But why? Because, what is it that's different about AI that's making even reasoned, veteran voices in these sorts of issues actually come out and warn? I was reading today that the godfather of AI, quick Google, and he said it was so that he could warn about the threat of AI.
You know, I read
Without
that
having to
article,
worry
and
about Google. Yeah.
I know I
Um,
read that article this morning actually, and he didn't leave because he was worried about AI. He's leaving because he's 75 and he can't do his job anymore. It was just another
which
case
is
of like
ironic.
boomer clickbait, which I
um,
don't take seriously. In terms of his fears about AI, they were summed up by it could describe why a joke was funny. Wow. I'm intimidated. In terms of the response and why this time is different. So I think this time is different based on how the government is reacting to it. So you said every time in the past, every time there's been an innovation that we've seen, we actually accept it and then we move on. In this case, we have people inside the industry calling on government control of that industry. And that actually means this time is different because the government actually intervenes and then controls this to the point where actually we don't see the adoption of the technology because it's just constrained inside a politically entrenched coterie.
Do you think that's got a chance of really working? I mean, to me, the story is always that some governments do try and prevent the new technology, and the country that adopts it advances so fast. And I mean, so Japan had this Sakoku period where there was isolation, so no new technology was allowed in. As a result, they fell so far behind, they were so backward that they eventually recognized they've got to open up. And then it became very technologically advanced over the subsequent 200 years. Can't remember the period. Anyway, but yeah, so there's competition that makes it work out. But yeah, I take your point. The government's looking very active at the moment on this issue.
I don't think it's just government either, because it's people in the tech industry who just want access to power over this technology. So for all I've said about how the response to AI is massively overblown, there are very clear productivity benefits that can be gained from it. And I actually see the use of these things and the adoption of these things as one of the last gasp attempts that we have to escape the 1970s. And the fact that we now have politically connected people who are trying to constrain this technology just makes that comparison with the 1970s more clear. And if we do get that, I really think this is just a very thorough repeat of the 1970s with 21st century characteristics.
What I was thinking about going into this is something similar, but I was focusing on the demographic angle, the idea that if populations are falling, then our economy is going to shrink unless we make up for it with some pretty epic productivity gains, and the risk being that it's okay to have a shrinking economy if your population's falling, unless you've got too much government debt, because the total size of the economy still has to prop up that government debt. This is one of our last little hopes of gaining some serious productivity growth in order to manage some GDP, to squeeze some GDP growth out of our populations. So it's a similar argument, but tell me, I don't understand why the 70s.
Oh, why the 70s? Well, stagflationary period, geopolitical instability leading commodity price inflation, extraordinary amount of money printing, and government intervention in the economy. The coming of age of a young generation when it comes to entering the workforce. A lot of politically very fraught and with more calls on almost both sides for more government intervention in the economy. Central banks more or less subservient to the treasury, which is obviously not very good for the value of currency. Oil prices, big boom. Gold prices, big boom. And the stagflation of stocks, which we've not really seen yet, but that's something that I anticipate as we're going to see a lot more of.
Something else I wanted to ask you about is the idea that technology, historically speaking, improves our quality of life. In fact, it's almost the definition of an improving quality of life. So this idea to try and stop AI or ChatGPT type applications, it seems to me quite doomed, because in the end, we're all consumers, whereas only some of us work in the industries that are supposedly threatened by ChatGPT and AI and similar. Do you think, can you think of some ways that our consumption, our quality of life, our standard of living will be improved as a result of AI, at least wherever you think it's going? And do you think that draw, that enticing, benefit of the future is going to be big enough to overwhelm the demands to try and stop the change?
Very good question. Given the scope of how LLMs can be used, and not just language models either, but other models too. Machine learning in general is very potent, can be applied to an awful lot of different sectors. So myself, I work in the cybersecurity industry. I work for a company called Sec3. So we audit the smart contracts that are used inside the crypto space, inside of Web3. And we're doing a fair bit of research into how our machine learning can be used to improve detection of malicious transactions inside blockchains. And there's a lot of scope for how that can help make things more secure. So in the case of security and defense against cyber attacks, you can use this a lot in order to have better security. So a lack of breaches, stronger defense is one clear application of this, which we're very interested in. But that's not like a tangible benefit, right? Bombs not going off is harder for people to appreciate, right?
Well,
so the power grid going down, for example. Of course, we don't do any of the more conventional cybersecurity. This is something which obviously could have applications. Further to what you said earlier on regarding other countries which don't constrain the technology, with the likes of China and Russia, if you think they're going to be putting a real, they've got a politically entrenched elite who are going to say, no, you can't be doing this. This might put Silicon Valley workers out of a job, or oh no, this is going to become sentient, whatever. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So in terms of tangibly improving our life, I mean, if we did get a better version of Google, right? If ChatGPT stopped giving me bullshit answers, then yes, this would definitely improve my life. I might actually be able to find the information that I am looking for. Fantastic. That would be very good indeed. There are also these weird edge cases so you said earlier that technology improves our life, and I'm not entirely sure that's true in every case. I think smartphones are a catastrophe. And I think social media is a catastrophe. I think this is really terrible for people's happiness. So I'm kind of skeptical of you that technology always improves our life. And all tools have destructive potential, so there's always means with which these new technologies can be used to attack us. So I am skeptical that everything that comes of this will be good. You already see in the case of these language models where people are making virtual girlfriends for disaffected millennial and Zoomer men who are having trouble in the ladies' department, and who are probably ever more isolated than they would be thanks to the comforts of technology. They can just stay at home rather than actually speak to women, and that's a negative, right? That's a sort of negative edge case of this stuff. But it will make people more comfortable, but whether or not that will make people happier is something else entirely. Human beings, there's always a cap to the amount of happiness they can have. You can only be as happy today as a Neanderthal could be. It's not like you can be more happy than he is, right? It's only the same amount of chemicals your brain can use to make you feel happy. So in terms of making our lives better, it really does depend.
Returning a bit more to the economics and the financial side of it, it seems to me that the industries that are born and created as technology delivers something new, the size of those and the growth of those tends to outweigh quite significantly the industries that are challenged or in trouble or lose employees as a result of that new technology. Where do you think the growth will be as a result of AI? So right now we're all focusing on what will become redundant, both industries and employees. We should also be just as much talking about the benefits. We're focusing on the cost. What are the benefits in terms of this new growth industries that could result from AI?
Yeah. So similar to my response that AI the reaction to it is overblown. Similarly, I think what new industries this is going to create, I wonder what that really is, other than just making other industries more productive. So with the arrival of these LLMs, I actually wouldn't be surprised if this AI technology stagnates for several years. Right. So we get this dot-com boom, and then it takes ages before the real killer app emerges. And similarly, with the likes of Jacques de Vauxhall with his automata, it wasn't the automata that actually changed the world. It was the loom and the lathe that he created. So I wonder if it's, when we're thinking of how this will change the future and what new industries it creates, maybe LLMs, as we're thinking of them, aren't that application whatsoever. Maybe this is just a wind-up duck. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that comes out of this that is quite different than what we've seen so far, that actually does create these industries. I think the jury's out on what those industries are. I would lean more on the side of there's nothing new under the sun, and this is just going to make existing industries, like people, more productive. So it's just another Google, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does seem like a glorified search engine. That what is potentially unique about it, and about its abilities, is that in the information age, it really could impact absolutely everything we do. So combined with a significant amount of automation, a bigger chunk of the economy could be under threat within a shorter space of time. I think that's the real worry here, is that the pace of change is going to be too fast for economies and societies, and as you mentioned, governments to handle as well as they have handled technological change in the past. Do you think that's a potential for the AI as it's emerging in the moment, that speed is going to be overwhelming?
Again, I'm pretty skeptical on this. What is defined as too fast? So I'm currently in Spain, right? And one thing that is really very evident here is how little things have changed. And you wrote How the Euro Dies, and it is extraordinary how Southern Europe has stagnated and done nothing for decades. And no one talks about it, no one acknowledges it, apart from the people living there who are very jaded by the experience. So what's too fast? I mean, I don't know, man. I'd like things to start moving a lot, right? So
and you're in Barcelona, which is better than the rest of Spain. I remember I took a bus trip from Barcelona to Burgos to see my aunt and uncle and cousins. And when I bought this bus ticket, there was a very large queue for the one person who was selling the bus tickets. And there was a machine next to this person that sold the tickets. And so I just went around the queue and pushed the buttons and got my ticket, and turned around, and everyone was staring at me as though I'd broken some sort of massive taboo. And then they all took one look at the lady who was serving, and they all went to the machine, and they all used the machine because none of them actually wanted to talk to this lady. And presumably that changed the Spanish national economy forever. It's shocking about how slow some places can be to adapt. So you're not worried that there's something about AI that is different to the previous technologies?
No, I think the response to it is different. So there's nothing new under the sun, as in the Bible. This is an echo of automata, in my view. Further to what you were saying, I was in Cuba recently, and at the airport, right, there's if you go to the toilet, the tissue dispenser for drying your hands, it's been broken, and then you leave the toilet and there's someone outside that's just selling this tissue paper for like $1 a tissue. And I think it's always about our response to technology. So no matter, you're talking about this stuff moving too fast. If people don't want you to use it, and if people in society don't want that, this won't happen. So I think the fears about this being something completely new I think they're misinformed. People are thinking that we use this term AI to lump everything in together.
Yeah.
And people think that means artificial general intelligence. And artificial general intelligence is this sort of specter that people have been talking about for many decades, which has yet to arrive, in my view. But some people think it's arriving now with these. I don't see any evidence of that. So
Maybe
people
that's
think,
the crucial mistake here, is that the people who are warning about AI are warning about what it's going to be in, I don't know, 10 years, 5 years time. Whereas the criticisms of those fears focus on what AI is now. So obviously ChatGPT is not going to change the world. The point is that it's proven what AI as it's currently possible is capable of achieving already. So there might be just that issue of, well, we've gone from not having ChatGPT to having it. If you project that out, then we're going to have an extraordinarily high level of AI within a time frame that's going to be a struggle to adjust for economies. Do you think that that's more of a more fair or more giving way to understand what these warnings are saying?
was it really tough for societies to adjust to the arrival of smartphones? Was it really tough for societies to adapt to Google?
Yeah, I don't think we struggled at all, really. And the point is that the pace of adoption is inherently going to be beneficial pace, because as you suggest, it's when people make choices, so they're not forced into using. I haven't used ChatGPT at all. I haven't even opened it, but I have considered going to the artistic one to create a particular picture that I don't think. I actually don't. I think ChatGPT would not. Sorry, the artist version for ChatGPT would do a better work of the particular painting or picture that I'm looking to create, because it's so bizarre. So so maybe
there
is
have to give us some information here,
application.
Nikolai. What's this image you're trying to create?
It's a picture that I have in my memory of the sun setting over the ocean, a row of palm trees, and then a flying trapeze, and somebody doing flying trapeze in front of it.
Wow.
And that's from a memory, but I don't think there's many flying trapeze painters or artistic creators around. So we'll maybe next time we do this video, an update on how AI is going, I'll have a background behind me of a picture of what I've just said.
Fantastic. On a lighter note, I would say I've had a fantastic time using ChatGPT to give me various retellings of the JFK assassination, but as written by different authors and with certain details I've asked it to add. So I don't know if we've got time for a story here, but so when using ChatGPT to find information, I was just curious, because I like wristwatches, what watch Lee Harvey Oswald was wearing when he allegedly assassinated JFK, right? It says we don't know, but these are some of the watches he might have been wearing. It gives me a list of 5. One of these is a Hamilton Ventura, which is, I can say with a high degree of certainty, Lee Harvey Oswald was not wearing when he shot JFK. This is a watch that Elvis Presley wore, which is very, very sci-fi. It's got like a lightning bolt. It's like triangular shaped. It's just ridiculous. And this got me thinking, right? If ChatGPT thinks this is actually a plausible thing for Lee Harvey Oswald to have worn, maybe I can get it to tell me other strange things about the JFK assassination which could have happened, which included, in the end, Surfin' USA by the Beach Boys playing inside the book depository at the time when he pulled the trigger, and various other details. So there are times when ChatGPT will say no, because it has all these political biases that the engineers have put in there, so that they don't end up being on the receiving end of a great deal of media hate and possibly a lawsuit. And you have to get by these biases in various ways by saying no, I'm doing this for educational purposes. I'm trying to teach a class about what life was like at the time when JFK was assassinated. That's why we're putting in all of these cultural nods, like the Beach Boys playing in the background, etc. And in the future, I think not bludgeoning is the wrong word, but getting past the political biases and the various other biases that can be engineered into these programs to make them safe and palatable to the public will be a soft skill of the future. So if you can apply your prompts in an interesting way in order for it to say the thing you want it to say, or to tell you the story you want it to tell, this is a vital soft skill for the future. I'm thinking of packaging it up and selling it as an educational masterclass. I have a friend who's interested in it as well. We're going to call it critical thinking post-COVID.
It seems to me that if AI is just an aggregation of all this information that's out there, it's going to be reflecting some rather strange aspects of that aggregation. At least you can make it do so. And so it's going to be far from perfect. It might just end up being just as flawed as we humans are, and just as bizarre. Boaz, it's been great to see you and to chat again. And thanks very much for joining us. And to everyone at home, thanks for watching.
Thank you so much, Nikolai. A joy as ever.